Hi, hello. How you doing today? Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Outlook Industries podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Johnson. Let's get another great guest on the show today. I got the opportunity to talk to Shaun Miller. He's the action sports director for Pure Canna CBD, and he had a lot of great things to say about the action sports industry and about the positive effects that CBD can have as far as recovery. And I learned a lot about how they synthesize the CBD and how they extract it, and how Pure Canna is different than a lot of other CBD companies in the way that they extract their CBD, and the benefits that can have. I definitely learned a lot from Shaun today, and he had a lot of great things to say about the action sports industry and a lot of insightful information about where he thinks the industry is going and the innovation that needs to be done to get us there. So I definitely learned a lot and enjoyed talking to Shaun. So let's get him on the podcast and let's get right into this one, guys.
It's the Outlook Podcast. We're here at the Outlook Podcast. Just as we're here, we're talking to cool people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Outlook Industries podcast. I hope you guys have been enjoying the show. And today I have Shaun Miller on the podcast. How you doing, Shaun?
I'm doing well. How you doing today, Trevor?
I'm doing great. I just kind of want to first start off with who you are, what you do, kind of for people who don't know Pure Canna, what Pure Canna is, just that kind of basic stuff.
Sure. So I'm the action sports director here at Pure Canna. So I wear many hats, from writing the athletes' contracts to creating marketing collateral to magazine ads to, man, you probably name it. I about wear one of those hats.
Yeah.
So no, I'm a longtime motocross racer, almost 30 years now. So I've done a lot of that. So I have a lot of experience in action sports industry, and I've been very, very fortunate that a lot of my friends growing up went on to action sports industry jobs as well. So it's kind of cool that I get to work with all my friends too.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you kind of end up at Pure Canna? Is this your thing? Is it somebody else? They bring you in? How'd that work?
Well, kind of a funny story. So one of the founders, Jeff, and our general manager, Todd, are longtime friends of mine. Okay. We're all from a small town in Wisconsin growing up. And so the founder, Jeff, he created Pure Canna with his partner, Cody, and they started to grow the business. And then they brought their friend Todd in as general manager. And then just kind of one night we some buddies caught up for a couple drinks and, haven't seen each other in a while. And we got talking about business, and, it was kind of over a couple beers that diving into the action sports industry, just kind of evolved.
Yeah. Cause that's kind of an interesting evolution, especially, being kind of a newer product on the market, like CBD stuff. It's weird. Obviously, energy drinks have been doing it forever, getting into action sports. I just find it interesting how kind of the CBD market has been moving towards sponsoring action sports athletes. And I'm just kind of curious where that idea came from and how you take a business to that kind of marketing strategy.
So, as far as the energy drink companies and things like that, everybody is so focused on performance, right? Whether it's, we want gear that's vented better, right? We want boots that are safer. We want bikes that are faster. We need, vitamins and pre-workout and energy drinks, and all that stuff is performance driven, right?
Right.
But one of the biggest things that is missed, and I think some of the best trainers in the world have this, is that it's not all about performance so fast, right? You can only push your body just so hard till it fails. And so the best guys in the world are finding ways to recover. And that's where the CBD is starting to come in. And that was my take on it when we, over those couple beers, I was like, hey, this stuff is perfect for action sports because our bodies are continually beaten up, right? Broke bones or bruises or soreness or just from riding, training, etc. This is perfect for this. And I'm obviously not the originator of that idea. As there's, we're all kind of reaching for that market share, right? Yeah. But that is kind of the direction of some of the top CBD companies. As we're discovering that this is huge for athletes. And while we can still, depending on who makes, who produces the CBD, you can still pass the WADA tests and things like that, which is a huge issue.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Because it's like a lot of action sports athletes and athletes in general, they worry so much, about performance, and there's just not that push for recovery. But if you want to keep performing at your top level, you need to be recovering. So
absolutely.
That's really important. So kind of how did you get into motocross, and where did you grow up, and what's more about you?
So like I said, I grew up a small town in Wisconsin. My father was a professional racer in the 70s and things like that. So when I was 2, maybe 3 years old, like I had my first snowmobile. And then like I think I had one of those death trap 3-wheelers, like when I was like 6, and then, went from there. I had a 4-wheeler when I was like 7, and like my first dirt bike right around age 8-ish, something like that. So it kind of evolved, but kind of growing up outside of town, we had some land and stuff where we could ride, and then it evolved into building a track. And then I got older, and then I kind of worked on my own tracks and bikes and things like that. So, but I love dirt bikes, man. That's all I can say. I love racing. It's in my blood.
Gotcha. So that was kind of the natural progression for you, is like, hey, these are my buddies. They're all FMX riders or whatever. And you're like, okay, let's get them on. Let's get them sporting the product. So that totally makes sense. Did you do Supercross then?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, I never had the chance to turn professional in motocross or anything like that. But I had a pretty decent amateur racing career, and now I'm almost 40 now. So I'm more of a fun and kind of trophy hunter and experience chaser. Some of the stuff that I never got to do when I was younger, that's kind of some of the stuff I slide into my schedule a little here and there. Yeah,
of course. Where do you usually hunt, and what do you hunt?
You can see behind me here, I got a bear from Mammoth. So I think next on the bucket list is probably, I would like to work really hard. I would love to try to podium Loretta's, and it's stacked in the 40 class. Those guys are so fast. I mean, it's ridiculous. The top 20 guys are so fast, and then you can never count out guys like Mike Brown or Kevin Walker. Those guys are just absolute savages on a bike. I'd probably like to go back to mini O's. I blew my knee out at mini O's last year. So,
gotcha.
So I'm recovering from knee surgery now. And so probably mini O's, I think, is probably on the bucket list too. So maybe do well there. And that's probably all I got for now. We'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Get a little bit of that. What kind of have you learned through working this action sports role as like the director?
Well, one of the things I could probably say, in all honesty, I have access to a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have. I get so much more stuff from the industry than I ever did as a racer, which is kind of mind-blowing. And don't get me wrong, I love it. Don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful. But when I see guys, like Jerry Robin, when I see guys like Cheyenne Harmon and Jeff Walker and some of those guys that struggle to kind of make ends meet and things like that, it's kind of gut-wrenching too, from my side of things, where I see those guys, they work so hard, and then it's just such a tough road for them. And like it kind of breaks my heart, because I feel like in some ways I suck up just a tiny little bit of that budget, right? Where some of those dudes who really work really hard, I mean, like I said, I'm just a weekend warrior trophy hunter now, right? But I'm absorbing a little bit of that budget, and those guys don't get it. They don't have those, those opportunities or those doors get closed on them all the time. And and I feel for them. And that's something where being a Pure Kana and kind of being outside the industry, I try to form meaningful relationships and connected relationships with all my athletes. I look forward to my monthly calls with my guys. I pretty much catch up with most everybody every month. I mean, I can tell you, like, most of my athletes have become my friends. Guys like Brian Fox, like, he's one of the best BMX riders in the world, and he is just such a rad, awesome person. And I love helping him out. But the other cool part is that guys that have flaws in their program and things like that, that's also something that we try to help connect, right? So we try to, if somebody is something missing from their program, one guy doesn't have a boot deal or a gear deal or a helmet deal, we try to push some buttons and try to facilitate as much as we can to help them grow. Because most sponsors, right, they think that, they think it's all about them, right? And it's one of the biggest frustrations I've had as a racer for the industry, right? And I'm really lucky. I work with some of the awesomest people in the industry, and they're so generous and good-hearted, right? But there's other companies that think it's all about them, right? And so they, you need to appear here, you need to do magazine shoots, you need to do this, you need to do that, and yet there's not enough given back to the athlete to ensure that they succeed, right?
Yeah.
And so we view it backwards. So, and that's how I see it. It's like, okay, I have to give these guys every tool and every opportunity to succeed, because for me, unless an athlete is winning X Games as a gold medal, or he wins an outdoor national or Supercross, or whatever, I don't win until they're on the podium. That's how I view it. Like, it's not a win for us, right? But it's an investment, right? So we invest heavy into our athletes and their programs to just make it happen for those guys. Curtis Downs, Nitro Circus BMX guy, awesome. Become just really good friends with him. He's such a good dude. But he's like, hey man, I do you know anybody that could, like, get me some knee pads? And I was like, what? I'm like, you don't have, like, it would blow your mind. One of those guys can't get a set of knee pads from anybody, right?
Yeah.
So, it's things like that where we try to go above and beyond just sponsorship in dollars. We try to really help fill out their program so they have everything they need to succeed.
Yeah. Wow. Because I was talking to Jared McNeil the other day, and he was talking about how, like, COVID had been really, really hard on him, just mentally, and, like, for the budget. And when you don't have those shows that are bringing in money, it's just, like, really hard for him to, like, make ends meet. And he didn't get invited to anything, and he was just, like, really down on himself until, like, we had that Deadwood All In show. So So I found that really interesting, thinking from the outside perspective. You see these guys and you think that they're, like, making the big bucks, obviously, like they're professionals, they're doing this professionally. It was really interesting for me to find out that that's not really exactly how it is behind the scenes.
No, it's not. You'd be surprised at a lot of what these guys don't make, right? And I mean, to be really honest, there's probably only, I would say there's like 8, maybe 450 guys making, like, a really good living. Yeah. And I would say there's maybe 5 250 guys making a decent living. And outside of that, everybody they're searching for that opportunity. They're searching for that paycheck. And, a lot of those guys they struggle to make it, they're not necessarily paycheck to paycheck, but the risk versus reward just certainly isn't there by sports standards.
Yeah, but they can't really they get an injury, and it's like they can't hardly facilitate that a lot of the time.
Oh no, you get hurt, and I mean, look at me, right? So I've been out the last 6 months with a knee injury, right? I can't do much, and I'm not even a professional, right? But I'm itching to get back and go racing and do that stuff, right? But imagine being somebody like a Jared McNeil. You break your leg or your ankle or something, right? And it's 8 weeks off the bike, but then it's 8 weeks off the bike that you're not working on your tricks, you're not working on your routine for X Games, you're not jumping shows, you're not doing any of that stuff, and it's it becomes really hard. And then you throw something like COVID in the mix, and just shows are canceled. And we've seen we've seen just absolute chaos throughout the industry. I mean, from monster trucks to Supercross to, the outdoors last year, they didn't know whether they should go or whether they shouldn't. Concerts were down. Like, you saw it ripple through everything. Music industry took an enormous hit, just because of concerts and things like that too.
Yeah, because concerts are where the music industry actually makes money. Because it's interesting, because my sister is a singer-songwriter, so she does a lot of that kind of stuff. So she definitely noticed the hit that came from just all of her friends too were just like not being able to make any money because they just like couldn't perform shows and stuff because they weren't happening. So I'm also just kind of wondering what you have seen or what you have heard from people during COVID that you found surprising.
Well, I think everybody kind of handled it a bit differently, right? I mean, we saw, like, from riding gear companies, they kind of all took a different stance on it. And it all had to do with where their products were manufactured, right? Or whether they were importing them, making them domestically. I think the biggest thing that surprised me was the sales of motorcycles and the sales of riding gear. Like, our sport exploded, right? And yet, with all of that being said, we are still feeling the ripples of it, even though we had record sales of motorcycles and everything else. But the problem is that you can't find any of it now, right? You go to a dealer and they have no bikes on the showroom, right? They can't get new ones. They sold everything they had. A lot of times they can't get motocross gear. It's selling faster. It took me 7 months to get parts I got a KLX 110 I've been slowly restoring. And it took me 7 months to get parts for that. Yeah. So with all the record sales, but the problem was they were selling everything they had and not producing new stuff because nobody was in the factories. So there's this huge shortage of so many different things, and it's stuff you wouldn't even think, right? Riding gear was really scarce, and some of the riding gear deals that are happening right now that I can't really talk about, but that I've been privy to some of the conversations and things like that, the stuff going on in the industry. It would shock you at some of the shortcomings by those guys, and between them and the teams and some of the stuff that's happening. It's really kind of opened my eyes as to how just fragile it could be, right? Yeah. Like from an economic standpoint, it's you turn one thing off and then it just chain reacts through it and ripples and creates this huge, one ripple becomes a wave is kind of essentially what happens.
Yeah, that's how it has seemed, is like if one thing goes down, it kind of just takes out the rest of the industry. And there's a lot of things that, like, say, like, riders get unsponsored and stuff like that because they just like can't facilitate paying them or whatever. As far as that goes, I'm sure you've seen some of that. Where do you guys, as far as PureCana, where do you guys make your product, and do you guys ship worldwide?
No, right now we're only sold domestically here in the U.S. And then it kind of varies with state to state. I'm not completely up on all of that because it's not necessarily one of the things I kind of dabble in. One of the hats I don't wear.
Yeah.
But for example, like Utah, I don't think you can even ship CBD there. Right? You can't sell or ship CBD there. And then, places like Canada, they don't have a problem with CBD, but they don't want it imported. And Australia, same way. It's got to be made domestically in Canada or Australia. They don't want it coming in with intent to sell or distribute. And they take it pretty serious. Apparently there's, I've heard from athletes, like, right when you get to customs, it's like, hey, you have to basically check in your CBD when you get there to make sure that you're not, like, there's no intent to sell or distribute.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, actually.
Because being kind of the new market that it is, and all these places legalizing marijuana and it kind of being oddly classified with marijuana, it's kind of, I'm sure it's been interesting to see how sales have gone.
Yeah, COVID, I think, was really kind of strange on everybody. Like for us, we didn't necessarily, I would say we played it a little on the safe side, and we saw some guys go all in, and we saw some guys back way out. We saw, I mean, basically between January 1 of 2020, there was like 2,400 registered CBD companies in the US. And by June of 2020, so 6 months into 2020, 600 companies closed up.
Wow.
Just in the first 6 months of 2020 because of COVID. And I'm not even sure what the current number is a year later. But yeah, it hit some companies really, really hard. We just kind of pulled back and just kind of stayed steady. We saw a small decline in sales, nothing crazy. But now things are kind of ramping back up with some of the Delta 8 stuff that's coming out now, and we're marketing some of that. So we're seeing huge sales with Delta 8 and some of our new products coming too. So looks like it's on the rebound now.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know the whole Delta 8 variant thing, can you explain that a little bit?
That I am not part of the scientific part of that, to be honest.
Yeah.
The kind of the how would I explain this? You are essentially, from a development point, and don't quote me on this, but it's just this side of marijuana. So you're getting more benefits of the plant. But can you catch a high from it? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so but it helps with recovery. It helps with sleep, anxiety, stress because of the additional properties of the plant. But again, you got to remember, this isn't like the 70s anymore. Like this, everything's certified organic. Everything is lab tested. Everything is purity tested. There's no herbicides, pesticides. Like we keep all of that stuff. Our stuff is, I believe we're one of 11 companies in the US that actually extracts with low temp CO2, which is what's keeping our purities really high, but it's also super expensive too. And it's unfortunately reflected in our pricing, but it's where we kind of draw the line between a premium brand and quote like a gas station brand. Right. Yeah. And so that's what happens is, people go, oh, well, I tried CBD, it doesn't work. Like, well, where did you buy it? Oh, I bought it at a gas station. And they're just like, ooh, yeah. Like, well, yeah, like what was like $40? Like, why is your stuff, over here? It's the same stuff. I'm like, it's not actually not even close. Right. Yeah. Because let's be honest, there's nothing healthy sold at a gas station. No, absolutely nothing. No. It's all junk food. I think probably the healthiest thing there is maybe water or Gatorade. Like that's probably that's as close as you get, really. It is. And so that's the hard part, is to get people to understand that unfortunately not all CBD is created equal, because the laws don't allow for it either. We have up to 0.3% THC, where our stuff is only at 0.02%. We're 15 times below the legal limit. That's great. Right? And so you're getting just enough because the THC is actually an activator for the CBD. Mm-hmm. So when you get, for the guys that aren't really up on this, there's isolate, there's broad spectrum, and there's full spectrum. And so, for example, a lot of my competitors, they go for the isolate route, which is 0% THC. And it is essentially the purest form of CBD you can get. But a lot of people claim it doesn't work. And the reason behind that is that there is no THC to actually activate it. And that is kind of where you got to kind of play with it a little bit and find the sweet spot. But it's perfect because there's zero tolerance for military, fire, police, rescue. Like they can't have any THC in it. So it's a perfect route for those guys. Especially like with topicals and things like that, it works awesome. Like even for us, like our topicals don't have any THC in them. Yeah. To try to market towards those kind of needs and those customers. So there's so much to it. And that's kind of one of the biggest parts of my job, is to help educate the public and the athletes on how to use CBD and when to take it and why. And so, not just the public in general, but then I coach the athletes and I work with all them. So I build out their programs and I finalize their dosages and say, hey, you need this based on, your height and body weight and diet. And so, and everybody is a little different. So there's no one size fits all. It's just something that you kind of have to experiment with. But I think we got it down pretty dang close. Not quite a science, but pretty close.
Yeah. How do you go about telling somebody what they should be taking and how much they should be taking? Like, what do you look at?
Well, it's height, weight, diet, a percentage of body fat, right? And then you gotta kind of factor in tolerance too. Like, we'll be really honest. There's some athletes out there that are regular marijuana users, that's fine. So, so what I do is I would say, okay, hey, like if you're taking oil drops, right, you should be taking them in the afternoon or evening, right? Because especially for our stuff, there's a little bit of THC in it.
Yeah.
And so, as we all know, THC is a downer. It slows you down. So say, okay, if you want to unwind, perfect. Or take a little bit to help you sleep. Perfect. We have guys, Brian Fox is a perfect example. He tracks his sleep with his Garmin watch. And we found out that we have our melatonin infused CBD drops, and he's doubling his amount of time in deep sleep every night using just that versus not.
Wow.
So it's incredible. So he's finding out that his recovery is way, way better. Right. So my advice is that, hey, take the oil drops in the evening. Right. But yet we have gummies that have no THC in them. So it's all right. Hey, take a gummy in the morning or take one post workout, because you can actually, you can notice the effects. They're almost as effective as a protein shake in recovery by reducing inflammation. That's one of the biggest things that it does. Reduces inflammation, where a protein will help rebuild, sore and torn muscles and things like that. So be honest, before this meeting, I actually was at the gym, put my time in, and I come home, protein shake and a gummy, and boom, I'm rocking and rolling.
Nice.
So if you got sore joints or muscles or things like that your topicals are pretty much as needed. It's those things. It's kind of my job too, because of exactly what I do. I've been experimenting with the Delta 8s and some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not a marijuana user, so it's a little weird. So I have a very, very low tolerance. So I've been experimenting with the Delta 8s, and I'm almost about a quarter of our gummy. Like, it's not a lot. It's a very tiny little cube. And man, I hear nothing for 8 hours. I'm out. Yeah. So it's kind of so that's kind of how you figure out a program, and, somebody with a little more body fat, CBD can either absorb faster and easier, or their body may not recognize it and reject it too. So you got to get their dosages. If you take too much, your body will recognize it as a waste and pass it through. But yet, if you're having a hard time and you're drinking a lot of water, oil and water don't mix. So the oil drops will sit on top of the water in your stomach and not absorb either. So I said, okay. So I have friends that, hey, we're not noticing anything. I says, try eating just a little piece of bread, like a corner of a piece of toast or something, and it'll absorb it and carry it right through. And they're like, oh my gosh, that completely changed it. Like, now I sleep awesome. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks, and it's per case. So I work really closely with all the athletes to make sure their programs are completely dialed. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's crazy. Kind of how much it is, just like each personal case is a lot different. I think it's interesting how CBD can really affect different people different ways, and just finding the right product for everybody is really important. What do you usually tell people to start with to kind of find what they should be taking?
Well, so for example, I start most everybody with 1,000 milligram oil, which is perfect for help with sleep and stress, anxiety. But the reason I start them there is that it's scalable. right? So you can either take more or take less, and it's real easy to find your range. So if somebody's like, hey, I took half of an eyedropper, and that's like perfect for almost everybody. I have a couple athletes that are like, hey, I have a higher tolerance, so they take 3/4 or a full eyedropper. So it's one of those things. So I say, hey, like take a half, and if your dreams are getting very surreal, and I'm like, take a little less. If you're not noticing anything, either try a little piece of bread or take a little more. And then say, okay, I usually start them out with some topicals for muscle soreness and aches and pains, and usually a bottle of gummies. That's pretty standard. I have those are like my 4 go-to products. For our athletes.
Gotcha. For people who are hesitant to get into CBD and don't understand really what CBD can do different than other medications, what do you usually tell them, and what do you usually recommend?
So everybody kind of has, to be really honest, a lot of people is, me coming up on 40, right? So I'm probably just on this side of like understanding it, right? I would say anybody that's probably over 45, probably a little closer to 50, are still like the old drug commercial, right? Like, this is your brain on drugs, right? And like they still push that really heavy. And so, when I explain it to them and I says, hey, this is like, you're going to get stoned. Like, this is an extract of the plant. And so you're taking all the medicinal benefits of it without essentially getting high. And they're like, oh, okay. But you have enough people that have gone so long where they don't sleep. They haven't been getting good sleep for years and things like that, that we're getting a lot of people in that 45, 50, and even above 50 now that are starting to go, well, back in the 70s, I used to smoke, about behind the high school or whatever. And so they're kind of like, well, now, my kids are grown and I don't have to worry about my kids judging me or me setting a bad example. And this is kind of a safe alternative. So with that mindset, they kind of roll into it and they start trying it. And when they try it, they're like, wow, like, what else do you have? And then, right. So it gets the ball rolling, but the majority of them they're sleep deficient. That's one of the biggest things I see with anybody older.
Yeah, because the people that I'm kind of thinking about is people like my parents' age, because my parents they really just don't understand it. But I think it really helped them because there's lots of benefits for CBD as far as like arthritis and sleep and just those things when you're getting a little bit older that can happen and just like hurt. And I think that CBD has a lot of benefits there. So there's lots of people that just like don't want to even like look at it because they just associate it with just getting high. So
yeah, exactly. That's one of the biggest fights that we have, honestly, is educating people and say, hey, like, this isn't like something where you are going to all of a sudden be wearing, tie-dye shirts and you're going to go full Rastafarian, it's not going to be one of those things. It's a very safe alternative. And so that's one of the biggest hurdles that I have in my job is just educating the public and just getting them to at least try it, because 90% of the time, if they try it, they usually come back and they're hooked on it. Right. And not that I particularly push just our brand. Like, I just try to feed everybody the info, right? So they can make an educated decision. So if they know the difference between, full spectrum and broad spectrum and isolate, and how it's extracted. I mean, you can extract with hexane, which is a flammable compound. You can extract it with ethanol, which, we know it's derived from corn, but it's still an additive to gasoline. Yeah. But when you extract them with hexane or ethanol, you can produce twice as much CBD for half the price, right? And that's where you're finding your gas station brands, right? That's why we call them gas station brands, is it's cheap. And then what happens is that when it's extracted, the hexane and the ethanol stays with the CBD. And then they end up having to, what we say is flash it off. They have to basically boil it and cook it to release it as like a vapor or a gas from the CBD. And that's what's happening, is that there's trace amounts of hexane and ethanol that will never completely get out. And it's what's keeping your purity level down. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh, I've tried it and it didn't work. Right. And so I believe, like I said, last I checked, which was probably, it's been a while, but there was, like I said, it's been a while, but about 11 companies are extracting with low temp CO2, which is, it's carbon dioxide. It's the air we breathe out.
Yeah.
So that's the only way to keep it, safe, effective, and organic.
So are you kind of like dry icing it then?
Kind of. Essentially, you're kind of. My understanding of the process is that it's basically it's pressurized and then kind of forced through screens. Is kind of how you're extracting it, more or less, right? In that regard. So cool. Think of it more like as a press, if you will.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on like the action sports industry and the fact that, like, how do you see FMX and BMX and all those things kind of growing, or do you see them kind of stagnant at the moment? Like, what have you seen growing up in the industry and recently through all your like action sports director roles?
Well, I can hands down say without a doubt that I've lived through probably the most exciting time in, I would say, action sports history, because, I got to see the progression of the backflip on a motorcycle, the double backflip with Travis, right? Like we got to see Nitro Circus evolve, right? We got to see so many things that were never thought possible, even, early 80s, early 90s. We got to see the progression of it. And so now what's happening is that we have kind of almost become limited because it's been pushed so far, right? I mean, we have Axel Hodges with the alley-oop on the quarter pipe, which is insane. Yeah. Right. And we have Tyler Berriman, who's just throwing the craziest turn-ups and turn-downs right now. And it can only just go just so far where it kind of runs out, right? And Travis has tried to bring, Pastrana's tried to bring it up with Nitro Circus. They started, making ramps that allow front flips and some of that stuff. But at some point, I think we're getting close to it, that the progression of it is slowing down, and you're seeing it in viewership, and you're seeing it in just the fans. I was at a freestyle show. I sponsor a freestyle team, the USFMX team, by Purcana. And, I was at one of the shows working an event. There was a 7-year-old kid standing next to me, and he's like, do a double backflip. And I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, there's only maybe 2 or 3 guys in the whole world that can do this. And, and the fans are just so jaded by it. And, and it's because we've grown up seeing Travis do this crazy stuff. And so it's hard. And I feel for the athletes. Guys like Jared McNeil they're insanely talented. And, Tyler Berriman and, the USFMX team. I mean, we have Brody Wilson, we have James Carter, who have all medaled at X Games, and the guys are incredible at what they do. And there's still some of the best riders in the world. And to have a little kid like that, and I'm just like, man, like it was kind of gut wrenching to hear from my side of things, is that that's where we are as a culture, and that's where the bar is set. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, because what we're going to see is a decline in TV viewership, and we're going to see a decline in, probably invites. And, I think the invites are getting tighter and tighter because there's only just so many guys that are willing to push themselves that far. I mean, Travis is getting older. Travis is about my age. And you just can't perform at that level anymore. And there's not much coming behind them, because there's not much left to do. That's the problem. So the next generation of riders, you're seeing Tyler Berriman, you're seeing Axel Hodges, and the only up and coming kid I think right now is probably like a Christian Dresser. Somebody like him, great kid, and man, I don't even Christian's I think 19, right?
Yeah.
And so like he's the only one I see that's really there to kind of take the reins, but we're kind of, unfortunately, I think we're going to witness almost the death of it, in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Jeez. Yeah. That kind of makes sense though, because you see, I've been watching a lot of Axel's stuff, and he's taken a lot from BMX because he used to be a BMX rider. So he takes a lot of the manual stuff and the nose manuals and like the backflips to like manuals, which are insane on FMX, which is like mind blowing. But there's gonna have to be innovation somehow in like some kind of way. But I don't know if X Games is gonna fall out, if it's gonna be Nitro World Games, if they're gonna like be another kind of competition. We're at this weird spot right now, especially for motorcycles. So
yeah, and that's why you're seeing a lot of guys doing, shows and things like that, right? Because they know that, it's so the fans are so jaded at like say X Games, and the viewership is just not there. And so, for the average Joe, it's awesome to go see these guys who are X Games level guys go out and perform a show right there in their hometown. So these riders are finding, essentially life afterwards, and they're making a great living, and, the risk and everything isn't there. They don't have to go out and kill themselves in the heat and train and do all this stuff like they used to.
yeah.
Right. And I feel for the current crop of guys like, like Christian Dresser. I feel for like Wanky. I feel for those dudes that are still crushing it and pushing themselves. Jared McNeil is still, Tom Parsons. Tom's a good friend of mine. Those guys are still crushing it. And, but they're kind of seeing that like, hey, I got to start kind of evolving to something different, because they're feeling the decline. I mean, and when there's no TV viewership, and when there's no, if X Games ever goes away from Moto, how are they going to make a living? There's no sponsorship dollars because there's no TV time.
Yeah.
So, so these guys are finding other roads, and it's like, well, hey, if I go and work 26 weeks of the year and do shows for, 26 weekends, I can make a great living. I'm promoting all my sponsors across the US, and, there's less risk. They're jumping to airbags now, which are incredible. So it's, and they're transportable. So they're not dumping dirt in, a parking lot or any goofy stuff like that. It's a quick, man. I think those guys set up in less than an hour, tear down in an hour.
Yeah.
And, it's a pretty awesome thing to see, just watching the setup and how they have it down to such a science, how they roll out the bag, how they inflate it, and it protects the riders and gives them an awesome kind of afterlife in the sport, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Because it can allow you to wreck and maybe not die. So, because I don't really know that much about FMX, honestly, and I've learned a lot this last year just being friends with James Carter, because he lives here in Rapids, so I got to meet him and talk to him a bit, and he's just an awesome dude. So like just talking to him and learning about FMX through a lot of you guys, it's crazy to me. It just doesn't make sense. So it's awesome, and I'm glad that I'm able to reach out to you guys and talk to you guys, because it's really enlightening for like an industry like mine, because like I'm a scooter rider, so like I'm kind of new in the game that way, and I've kind of seen the birth of my sport and like looking at yours and the path that yours has taken, and like BMX or skate. It's like trying to figure out where we might go next or where we might fit in has been really, really interesting. What do you think is gonna happen in the next few years with action sports?
Um, I would say without some heavy innovation, I think I don't think you're going to just see a cut and dry just split, but I think you're going to see a slow decline, to be really honest. And as much, I hate it as a fan because I'm a diehard motorcycle fan, and bicycles, like I can't ride a BMX bike or skateboard to save my life. I'm terrible.
Yeah.
I barely get down the mountain snowboarding. You know, and it's terrible to witness it firsthand. And because I absolutely love it, but I think without some heavy innovation from either, somebody's going to have to design something where they can start innovating new tricks. But that's what I think is beautiful about the scooter industry, right? Like it comes along. I have no idea how you guys even have ankles or knees left, but I see how you guys jump some crazy stuff. I have no idea, but the innovation is there in scooter, and I think that's what makes it so exciting. I think it's awesome to see the scooter industry coming along in that route, and I think it's going to blow up as far as the scooter stuff.
Yeah,
there's 8-year-old kids ripping backflips and just crazy stuff on scooters already, and it's absolutely impressive. So the innovation is there, but I think we've hit the tipping point of that with dirt bikes already. And, now you're kind of seeing some of it with, skateboarding a little bit. I wouldn't say, I think skate is still huge. Big air is absolutely gnarly.
It is crazy.
Those guys that do that, but there's still a lot of innovation left there that can happen. BMX, I think, is there for big air and dirt. I think there's a lot of room left. Just unfortunately, like I said, I think the dirt bike market, I think we've already seen the best of the best, and it's going to be really hard to top what's already been done.
I think that hopefully through people being introduced to action sports through scootering, that the other action sports will be able to grow. Because I think that just kids being introduced, because scootering is definitely, it's a little bit easier as far as the learning curve is concerned. So it's really easy to learn like a tail whip and a bar spin and the 360 and all like those basic tricks to get you into it. And then after that, people can switch to skate, BMX, FMX. Like, it's just getting kids into the sport, and the innovation and tricks that come from scooters are very unique. As far as what you can do. So there's been lots of people doing weird stuff on BMX bikes that are like scooter tricks originally. And maybe that'll cross over to FMX too. Like there's always that possibility, which would lead to a lot of interesting, new, exciting tricks happening. So there's always that possibility, but I think there is a lot of growth, and I think there is a lot of possibility through social media. It might not be the same platforms that it used to be as far as like X Games and monster events and Supercross and stuff like that. But people like Axel Hodges are doing a great job with social media marketing. So that's just where everything seems to be going. So that's the innovation that's going to need to happen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, without some heavy innovation, for like the dirt bike market, that's just where I see it. But yet for a scooter or a skateboarder, right? Like there's the investment to get into the sport is so minimal compared to a dirt bike, right? I mean, you got to go, it's $10,000 to go buy a dirt bike right now, if you can find one. Right. Yeah. And then, oh my gosh, well, I need a set of gear. And I mean, by the time you buy boots and everything, you've blown, dang near $1,500 between a decent helmet, decent set of boots and gear, right? One set of gear, by the way.
Yeah.
And then, okay, cool. And then they got to learn to ride and then, figure out, and then they got to still progress. And it's years into learning freestyle and, tricks like that. It's such a steep learning curve, and the expense to get there is so massive versus, skating. I mean, I'm not even sure what a decent skateboard runs these days, but I imagine it's probably near $150 or something, right?
Exactly.
There you go. And so, versus like even BMX, I mean, oh my gosh, dude, just a BMX frame, I think right now is like a solid $600 for a decent one. Right. Yep. So, you could blow an easy $800 to $1,000 for kind of a middle of the road kind of starter bike for, a BMX for a kid to go ride, park with. And so even then, I mean, that's a big spend for, mom and dad, especially, during COVID, people lost their jobs and people got furloughed and, the stimulus checks help some, but I mean, for mom and dad to go drop $1,000 so, little Johnny can learn to BMX. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I'm learning to play golf and I was blown away at what a set of golf clubs cost.
Oh yeah. Golf is so expensive.
But hey, you could go finish 8th or 80th at, some golf tournament and you can make decent money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, there is no 80th place for the outdoors, right? That guy went home and lost money. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even the guy, I'd be willing to bet, man, if you finished outside the top 20 in the 450 class, and if you had to drive probably more, I would say, if you had to drive more than say 5 hours, you probably lost money on the weekend. Right. Yeah. And that's brutal, right? After spending, the aforementioned costs to get into it, that's a big spend. And yeah. I think that's why, I think that's what's awesome about scootering is in skateboarding is it's still relevant because people can still afford to go do it, and mom and dad are like, all right, cool. Like, hey, you can go learn to skate. And if you're not into skating, okay, I lost $150 and a pair of shoes, maybe, like, big deal.
Yeah.
But little Johnny gets hurt, and decides he doesn't want to ride anymore. Well, okay, there's, I mean, gosh, I think it's like $5,000 for 65 nowadays.
Jeez.
Right. Yeah. So, little Johnny just decides he doesn't want to ride. And here's mom and dad like, okay, well, now I maybe sell the bike for $3,000 if I'm lucky. And what am I going to do with this gear? I just spent, $1,500 in gear. I got to throw that out. Like, yeah, it's really hard. And that's where the struggle is.
Unless the parents are into it, it's a hard investment for them to take. Yeah,
absolutely.
And with the whole Metal Militia and stuff like that, and Crusty Dirt Demons, that's what I was thinking of. That kind of brought a lot of people into it with Travis and all that stuff. But now it's just kind of hard. I totally see that. So,
yeah, and I think some of the beauty of what's happening too is the Monster and Red Bull and Rockstar are now putting window stickers up at the gas stations and things like that. And they're trying to draw in, outside people to the sport, of motocross, which is great. And I mean, Mountain Dew did an awesome job, probably late 90s, early 2000s. They were really big with it, especially Dew Tour and things like that. That was awesome to see outside companies investing heavy into action sports to drive it. And it elevated the competition, right? We saw some of the best skateboarders come through. We saw some of the best BMX guys come through in those eras.
Yes, for sure.
Right? And now, social media is blown up to the point where there's so much content. People are basically, in my opinion, they're kind of almost bored with it already, right? We're fed this constant stream of exciting new things, right? You don't have to watch the outdoors. You could literally catch it on everybody's Instagram nowadays and their stories. If you know somebody that's there, you basically got to see the race for free.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, and it's hard because a lot of those companies are getting away from, outright sponsorships, and they're driving more towards social media sponsorships. And I'm guilty of this, right? Because it's my job to look at people's social media and to follow it and keep it on track. Right. But I catch myself doing it all the time. Somebody goes, "Oh, I'm holding this product. You should buy this." And I don't care. I don't care what they're holding. I scroll right past it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Right. But hey, you show me the new Husqvarnas that are coming out. I'm zooming in and I'm looking at it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, we're fed this constant stream of information, and it gets so diluted out. And I think there almost needs to kind of be a reset with social media as well. Just, I think there actually needs to be better content and less of it. So it keeps it kind of fresh. And that's kind of where I am with the action sports Instagram for PureCon, is that it's a little less content, but I want it to be solid content and good content and meaningful or something downright exciting. So I'm pushing really hard for that. Because I'm probably a little old for the curve, but I'm pretty burnt out of social media, to be honest. I have more interest in working with really good, down to earth people, like Curtis Downs, Brian Fox, Christian Dresser, James Carter, Jared LaRue, TJ Tiffany, those guys, Brody Wilson. These guys are all awesome, solid dudes. I don't care how many followers they have.
Yeah.
I really don't. As long as they're in their contract or they're meeting their obligations for social media posts and things like that, I don't care how many followers they have. They're just good people, right? And by being a good person, they're representing your brand always. And that is important, right? And so I don't like doing short-term deals with anybody. I want to work with solid people. Like, I don't, and that's just me, right? I'm the 7-year-old kid, like, oh, do a double backflip, because I've done it so long that I'm pretty jaded by it. I don't care how many races you won. I don't care about X Games medals. Like, I want to work with good people. And that to me is what builds a brand, and that's what lasts. When an athlete is signing hats and taking time and taking pictures with little kids, that's huge, right? Like, oh, that guy was so nice, he's so cool. But there's that old saying, like, you never want to meet your heroes, right? And so when you have somebody that's that good with people, they always remember, right? Versus somebody coming off the track and having a bad attitude, or it's always that one guy, and it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. So and that's just where we are, is we just want to work with just really down to earth, solid people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a couple more questions for you before we end. Sure. What would you kind of tell yourself at 20? Like, what advice would you give yourself at 20?
To be perfectly honest, don't get hurt as much. That'd probably be me.
Yeah.
Break less bones. To be really honest, for all the ups, downs, goods and bads, and this is just, it's my personal belief that we all end up where we're supposed to be in life, right? Through, you call it chance, call it luck, you call it whatever you want, right? Like, I believe you got to work hard for everything you do, right? And there's, in life, you don't ever get what you owed or what you deserve. You only get what you negotiate, and that's the reality of it. So I don't think I would honestly change much. I believe that I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is where I believe this is. Not trying to really mix God, religion and things like that, but I believe this is where God intended me to be.
Yeah.
At least for right now. And I don't know what the future holds. It's in His hands. And I just know that I'm supposed to be where I am right now, doing this podcast with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. But the last question that usually people have to think a little bit about, and that's okay. And I just like going here because it really kind of gauges for me how different people think about like life. But kind of, what is your meaning of life?
The meaning of life. Well, I think, to be honest, we're all going to die, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I try to get, now that I'm older, and it's, I guess I probably didn't fully appreciate it when I was younger, but now that I'm a little bit older and smarter, and this has kind of been my go-to for probably the last 8 or 10 years, right? I try to enjoy as much of life as I can, right? I try to hold on to all the experiences. So, if I decide I want to go race a dirt bike, I put my all, I give it my all. I work hard, I train hard, I ride as much as I can, I make sure everything's ready to go. And I do the same with my work, my personal life. If I'm going to do something, I work really, really hard for it. But I think that we're not just supposed to kind of meander through life. I think we're supposed to enjoy it. And I think a lot of people get their spirits crushed early in life, and they don't know how to rebound from it and make the most of it. They get sucked into a job and they're miserable. And then they wake up 30 years later and they're just like, I hate what I'm doing. I hate my job. I hate my boss. I hate this. I hate that. But they never stepped outside their comfort zone to make it happen, or to grab a hold of the happiness that they should have. And so for me, I think just, you got to take the good with the bad, but I think you should just enjoy every single day. And just, give it your best, because, hey, if that opportunity ever comes up, you got to be prepared for it.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that response. That was perfect.
Right? Might have been a little drawn out, but
no, I never know what to expect when I ask that question. That's what I love about it. So people take it so many different directions. But where can we follow you?
So I personally, I actually run Pure Kana Action Sports Instagram page. So you can check us out there. You can follow our main page, which is kind of more dedicated to products and our influencers, which is just Pure Kana. And then obviously our website, you can check out our complete list of products there. www.purekana.com, PUREKANA.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you, Shaun, for coming on the podcast again. Thank you guys for listening to another episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day, night, evening, whatever time it is for you. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.